The Velcron Empire had ruled the stars for 300 years, and their fleet was the most powerful force anyone had ever seen. They had conquered 47 worlds, and every species that stood against them had fallen within weeks. Their warships were massive, and their weapons could turn entire planets into dust. When their scouts found Earth floating in space like a blue jewel, the Empire's leaders didn't waste any time. They called their best admiral and told him to gather the biggest fleet he could find. Admiral Corvin was chosen for this mission, and he felt nothing but pride. He had destroyed 12 worlds before, and this one would be no different. Corvin stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched Earth getting closer on the giant screen in front of him. The planet looked beautiful with its blue oceans and white clouds. He could see the continents and the lights of human cities twinkling on the dark side. His second officer, Talrus, was running scans on the planet and checking for weapons or defenses that might cause them trouble. After a few minutes, Talrus looked up with a confused expression on his face. He told Corvin that there was almost nothing in orbit around Earth. Just a few small satellites and some basic space stations that looked like they were barely holding together. There were no weapon platforms and no shield generators and no military ships waiting to defend the planet. Corvin felt his confidence grow even stronger. These humans were even more primitive than the reports had suggested. They couldn't even protect their own sky properly. He ordered his fleet to move closer and prepare the invasion force. 300 warships moved through space in perfect formation, and each one was ready to rain fire down on the human cities below. Corvin planned to destroy their biggest cities first as a warning. Then he would accept their surrender and add Earth to the long list of Velcron conquests. What Corvin didn't know was that humans had learned a very important lesson a long time ago. They had learned that the best weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. Deep underground in the mountains of Colorado, there was a massive facility that most humans didn't even know existed. Commander Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when every alarm in the building started screaming at once. Red lights flashed on every wall, and every computer screen suddenly showed the same thing. 300 hostile contacts had just crossed past the moon, and they were heading straight for Earth. Morrison put his coffee down and walked quickly to the main command center. His team was already at their stations, and everyone was moving fast, but nobody was panicking. They had trained for this exact moment for years. Lieutenant Amy Collins was sitting at the sensor station, and her fingers were flying across the keyboard. She looked up when Morrison came in and gave him the numbers. 300 ships, and they matched the Velcron designs that their alien friends had warned them about. Morrison nodded slowly and asked how long they had before the fleet got close enough to attack. Amy told him 18 minutes. Morrison took a deep breath and opened a secure channel to the president. Laura Bennett's face appeared on his screen, and she looked tired, but her eyes were sharp and focused. She asked Morrison if they were ready, and he told her that every system was green and ready to fire. Morrison asked for permission to activate the defense grid. The president paused for just a moment, and then she nodded. She told him to give the Velcrons one chance to turn around and leave peacefully. Morrison agreed and switched to the broadcast frequency. His message went out in every language, including Velcron. He told them that they had entered Earth's space with weapons ready and hostile intentions. He warned them to turn their ships around and leave immediately, or they would face total destruction. He made it very clear that this was their only warning, and there would not be a second chance. On Corvin's bridge, the message came through, and the translation system rendered it in perfect Velcron language. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Then Corvin started laughing, and soon his entire crew was laughing with him. The admiral couldn't believe what he was hearing. These primitive humans who could barely leave their own planet were threatening the mighty Velcron Empire. Talrus tried to tell Corvin that something was wrong with the energy readings. He said there were massive power signatures all over the planet and in the space around it, but Corvin waved his concerns away and told him it was probably just old reactors or primitive fusion plants. He ordered the fleet to continue forward and prepare to fire on the largest human cities. Back in the Colorado facility, Morrison watched his screens as the Velcron fleet kept coming. They hadn't slowed down at all, and their weapons were powering up. Amy looked at Morrison with worried eyes and told him the aliens were actually speeding up. Morrison felt the weight of what he had to do next pressing down on his shoulders. He had hoped the warning would be enough. He had hoped they would see reason and turn back. But the Velcrons had made their choice, and now humanity would show them what a terrible mistake that was. Morrison opened channels to every defense station on the planet. Underground facilities in every continent received his signal. Hidden platforms in orbit around Earth woke up from their disguises. Ocean floor installations that had been sleeping for decades suddenly came to life. Morrison's voice was steady when he gave the order. He told every station to prepare to fire. The countdown clock on his screen showed 10 seconds until the Velcrons would be in range. President Bennett's voice came through his earpiece one last time. She told him he had full authorization to defend Earth and to show the Velcrons what humanity was really capable of. Morrison pressed his hand against the authorization panel, and his biometric signature confirmed his identity. He spoke clearly into his microphone and told all stations to fire at will. The defense grid activated, and thousands of weapons that had been hidden in plain sight for decades finally revealed themselves to the universe. The satellites that had looked so peaceful and ordinary suddenly split open like flowers blooming in fast motion. Inside each one was an aperture that glowed with barely contained energy. Down in the oceans, massive installations sent columns of pure power upward through thousands of feet of water. The underground arrays released their stored energy through channels that had been carved through solid rock over many years of secret construction. From every direction around Earth, thousands of beams of light shot upward into space. These were not the simple lasers that most species used for weapons. Humanity had taken the warnings from their alien friends very seriously and had pushed their science further than anyone thought possible. The beams were made of quantum-entangled energy that could cross vast distances almost instantly. Each beam was carefully tuned to a specific frequency that would make the exotic matter cores inside Velcron ships become unstable. The cores powered everything on the alien ships, including their shields and engines and weapons. When the beams hit those cores, the results were catastrophic. Admiral Corvin saw the energy spikes on his sensors and had just enough time to feel surprised before his entire world turned into light. The first beam hit the Eternal Dominion's forward shield and passed right through it like the shield wasn't even there. Then it struck the exotic matter core in the center of the ship. The core didn't explode in a normal way. It simply stopped existing and took most of the ship with it. Corvin and his crew ceased to exist in less than a heartbeat. The same thing happened to every single ship in the Velcron fleet at exactly the same moment. 300 warships faced 300 perfectly calculated targeting solutions. There was no battle and no exchange of weapons fire and no dramatic struggle. There was only complete and total annihilation that happened so fast it was almost impossible to believe. In the Colorado facility, alarms screamed for 3 seconds and then went silent. Every screen showed empty space where the Velcron fleet had been just moments before. Amy stared at her displays with her mouth hanging open. She told Morrison that the fleet was gone and the threat board was completely clear. There were no survivors and no escape pods and no debris floating in space. The ships hadn't been destroyed in the normal sense. They had been erased from existence as if they had never been there at all. Morrison felt a strange mix of emotions rushing through him. Relief that Earth was safe, horror at what they had just done, pride in humanity's achievement, and underneath everything else, a cold certainty that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. He ordered Danny Foster to calculate how many Velcrons had been on those ships. Danny ran the numbers based on standard crew sizes and came back with an answer that made everyone in the command center go quiet. 900,000 personnel had been on that fleet, and none of them had survived. Morrison felt the weight of those deaths settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. It didn't matter that the Velcrons had come to conquer Earth. It didn't matter that they would have killed billions of humans if they had succeeded. 900,000 lives had ended in less than 2 seconds, and that was something Morrison would carry with him forever. President Bennett appeared on Morrison's screen again, and her face looked older than it had just minutes before. She asked for a report, and Morrison told her everything. Complete elimination of all hostile forces. No damage to Earth or any of their installations. No human casualties. Bennett closed her eyes for a long moment and whispered something about God helping them all. Then she opened her eyes and told Morrison she was calling an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council. They needed to prepare for what would happen next because the Velcron Empire was not going to ignore the loss of an entire fleet. Morrison agreed and recommended they stay at high alert and get ready for possible revenge attacks. He also suggested they contact the Zipheron Collective because their alien friends needed to know what had just happened. After the president ended the call, Morrison looked around at his team. Everyone looked shaken and pale. They had trained for this scenario hundreds of times, but nothing could really prepare someone for the reality of it. Amy's hands were shaking and Danny was staring at his screens with empty eyes. Morrison knew he needed to say something to help them deal with what they had just done. He raised his voice so everyone in the command center could hear him clearly. He told them that what they did was not murder but defense. The Velcrons had come to Earth planning to conquer and kill. Humanity had given them a warning and they had ignored it. Every person in that room should be proud that they stood between Earth and destruction. They had saved billions of lives today. Morrison paused and made eye contact with each member of his team. He told them that the president was right about one thing. This was just the beginning. The Velcron Empire was huge and they were not going to let this defeat go unanswered. Everyone needed to stay sharp and focused. They should rest when they could, but understand they might need to do this again very soon. The team responded with affirmations and Morrison felt a little better. They were good people, and they would hold together through whatever came next. Far away on a planet that orbited a distant star, the Velcron High Command received the last transmission from Admiral Corvin's fleet. The automated distress beacons had sent out their signals the moment the ships were destroyed. Supreme Commander Vorkath sat in his command chamber and watched the recording over and over. 300 ships destroyed in less than 2 seconds. The entire fleet simply ceased to exist with no warning and no conventional weapon signatures. Nothing in the Velcron database matched what they were seeing. Vorkath's claws dug into the arms of his throne as rage built inside him. The intelligence reports had said the humans were primitive and barely capable of space travel. Obviously, those reports had been completely wrong. His chief science officer, Porthan, suggested they try diplomatic contact with the humans. If Earth had technology this advanced, then maybe they would be willing to negotiate. But Vorkath would not hear of it. The humans had destroyed an entire fleet and killed 900,000 Velcron warriors. This demanded revenge, not negotiation. He ordered Porthan to prepare a second fleet that would be twice as large as the first. This time they would approach from beyond the range of Earth's weapons and bombard the planet from a safe distance. They would turn the entire world to ash and show the galaxy what happened to species that defied the Velcron Empire. 6 weeks passed and Earth's deep space monitoring network detected a new threat approaching from the darkness between stars. Morrison had barely slept during those weeks because humanity had been working around the clock to strengthen their defenses. They built new installations and upgraded existing systems and prepared for exactly what they knew was coming. When the sensors picked up the incoming fleet, Morrison was in the command center running on coffee and determination. Amy called out the numbers from her station, and Morrison felt his stomach drop. 600 ships this time, and they were approaching from 6 different directions at once. The Velcrons had learned from their first mistake, and they were being much more careful now. Morrison studied the tactical display and saw that the enemy fleet was staying far beyond the range that Earth's weapons had used in the first battle. They were planning to bombard the planet from a distance they thought was safe. But what the Velcrons didn't know was that humanity had been very busy during those 6 weeks. Morrison asked Amy about the status of the New Horizon network, and she told him that all stations were ready. The quantum relay satellites were in position, and they had extended Earth's effective weapon range by a factor of 10. Morrison smiled grimly and told his team to prepare to engage. He was going to teach these aliens another lesson about underestimating humanity. The Velcron fleet began their attack by launching thousands of missiles toward Earth. Energy, weapons fired from hundreds of ships and kinetic projectiles, were hurled through space at incredible speeds. Supreme Commander Vorkath watched from his flagship and felt confident that this time would be different. They had learned from Corvin's failure, and they were attacking from beyond the humans' reach. The planet would be destroyed and the Empire's honor would be restored. But the missiles and energy beams never reached Earth. The quantum defense network activated and created overlapping fields of energy that absorbed everything the Velcrons threw at them. Every missile was neutralized and every beam was stopped and every projectile was caught before it could reach the atmosphere. Vorkath stared at his displays in shock and demanded to know how the humans were doing this. He got his answer a few seconds later when the Horizon Network satellites began to fire. The beams they generated were even more powerful than the weapons that had destroyed the first fleet. The quantum relay systems amplified the energy and focused it across distances that should have been impossible. 600 ships suddenly faced the same fate as Admiral Corvin's fleet. The beams reached across millions of kilometers in an instant, and each one found its target with perfect accuracy. The Vengeful Honor's shields failed first, and then the exotic matter core became unstable. Vorkath had just enough time to realize he had made a terrible mistake before he and his entire ship simply stopped existing. Morrison watched the threat board clear for the second time in 6 weeks. He ordered confirmation of total elimination, and Danny reported that all 600 ships were gone. No survivors and no debris and no trace that the fleet had ever existed. This time the command center didn't celebrate or fall into shocked silence. Everyone knew exactly what this meant. Humanity had just killed another 1.8 million Velcrons, and the Empire would not stop coming. President Bennett appeared on Morrison's screen looking exhausted. She told him that communications were flooding in from multiple alien species across the galaxy. Word of what humanity had done was spreading fast, and the entire galactic community was in an uproar. Morrison asked what kind of reactions they were getting, and Bennett told him it was mixed. Some species were terrified of Earth and wanted nothing to do with humans. Others were impressed and wanted to establish trade relationships. The Zifferan Collective wanted to form a formal alliance. But the Velcron Empire had declared a state of total war against humanity. They were mobilizing every ship and every resource they had for a third attack. Morrison felt his blood go cold and asked how many ships they were facing this time. Bennett told him that intelligence estimates put the number between 4,000 and 5,000 warships. The Empire was sending their entire military force, and they planned to overwhelm Earth through sheer numbers by attacking from every possible angle at once. Next 3 months were the most intense period in human history. Using technology that the Zifferans and other friendly species had shared, Earth built its first fleet of ships that could travel faster than light. There were only 50 vessels, but each one was designed with the quantum weapons technology that had proven so effective. Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of the new Terra Defense Force. His flagship was called the Liberty, and it was a sleek, beautiful ship that carried enough firepower to eliminate entire fleets on its own. Morrison stood on the bridge surrounded by the best crew humanity could provide, and they drilled endlessly for the battle they knew was coming. Captain Lisa Hayes was Morrison's executive officer, and she was one of the finest officers Earth had ever produced. She reported that long-range sensors were picking up the Velcron Armada approaching. The count was 4,200 ships, and they were coming in from multiple vectors. Morrison stood calmly on his bridge and asked for the Armada's position. Lisa told him they would be in range of Earth in 40 minutes, and it looked like they planned to surround the planet and attack from all sides simultaneously. Morrison smiled and told his crew they weren't going to wait for the Velcrons to reach Earth. He ordered all ships to prepare for faster-than-light travel because they were going to meet the enemy halfway. The Velcron Armada was the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled in its 300-year history. Supreme Warlord Kravoth commanded the attack from his massive dreadnought at the center of the formation. He was determined that this time there would be no mistakes and no underestimation of the enemy. Every ship was ready, and every weapon was charged, and every warrior was prepared to die if necessary. Kravoth gave the order for all ships to maintain their formation as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They would emerge in a sphere around Earth with every angle covered. The humans could not possibly defend against this many ships attacking at once, but when the Armada returned to normal space, they found something completely unexpected waiting for them. 50 human warships hung in the void between the Velcron fleet and Earth. Their weapons were already powered up, and their targeting systems were locked on. Kravoth looked at his displays and started laughing. 50 ships against 4,000 was not a battle. It was a massacre. He ordered every vessel to open fire immediately and destroy the pathetic human fleet. The Velcron Armada unleashed everything they had in one massive, overwhelming attack. Thousands of energy beams and millions of missiles and devastating kinetic weapons all targeted the tiny human fleet. It should have been instant annihilation and complete victory. Instead of being destroyed, the human ships activated quantum shield matrices that surrounded each vessel in layers of protective energy. Every incoming attack was absorbed or neutralized or reflected back toward the ships that fired it. The 50 ships of the Terra Defense Force didn't move at all as the massive barrage washed over them, like water flowing around rocks in a stream. Not a single human ship took any damage, and Kravoth felt confusion replace his confidence. He had just thrown the combined firepower of 4,000 warships at 50 targets and accomplished absolutely nothing. Before he could give another order, the human fleet fired back, and Krevoth's confusion turned to horror. The Liberty and her sister ships had been designed for one specific purpose, which was to project overwhelming force across vast distances with perfect accuracy. Each ship could engage multiple targets at the same time, and their quantum targeting systems could track thousands of enemy vessels simultaneously. The ship-mounted weapons were more compact than the planetary defense systems, but they were no less deadly. 50 ships fired in perfect coordination with their targeting data, shared across a quantum network that allowed them to act as a single unified weapon. The beams that shot out from the human fleet were streams of pure destruction that crossed space in the blink of an eye. Krevoth watched his mighty armada begin to vanish as if it had never existed. Ships didn't explode or break apart into debris. They just disappeared as their exotic matter cores were destabilized on a quantum level. Hundreds of ships were gone in the first second. Thousands disappeared in the first 10 seconds. Krevoth couldn't believe what he was seeing because nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. The Velkron Empire had conquered dozens of worlds and fought hundreds of battles, but they had never faced anything like humanity. He screamed orders to retreat and told all ships to make emergency faster than light jumps to escape. But the human weapons were faster than the Velkron ships could run. The Terra Defense Force had calculated every possible retreat vector and every potential escape route before the battle even began. As ships tried to flee, they found quantum disruption fields blocking their faster-than-light drives. They were trapped in normal space with no way to run and no way to hide. The human targeting systems tracked each ship as it tried to escape and eliminated them one by one, with methodical precision. Some Velkron captains tried to surrender by shutting down their weapons and broadcasting distress signals, but Morrison had made the decision before the battle started that there would be no prisoners taken. The Velkrons had come to destroy Earth, and humanity would show them the cost of that choice. The battle lasted 17 minutes from start to finish. When it was over, 4,200 Velkron warships had been reduced to nothing. Approximately 12.6 million Velkron warriors had been erased from existence. The Velkron Empire's entire military force had been annihilated in less than 20 minutes. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty and looked at the empty space where the massive armada had been. His crew was silent and nobody celebrated because they all understood the weight of what they had just done. Morrison ordered Lisa to open a channel to the Velkron homeworld, and she confirmed the connection a moment later. Morrison's face appeared on screens across the entire Velkron planet, in their capital city and in their government halls and in public spaces where millions of civilians watched. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried absolute certainty behind every word. He told the Velkron people who he was and what had just happened. Their government had sent 3 fleets to destroy Earth, and 3 times humanity had defeated them. The Velkron military no longer existed because humanity had erased it from the stars. Not because humans wanted to, but because the Velkrons had given them no choice. Morrison paused to let those words sink in before continuing. He told them that humanity was not interested in conquest or taking Velkron worlds or stealing their resources. All Earth wanted was to be left alone in peace, but he made it very clear that if the Velkrons ever threatened Earth again, or ever raised a weapon against humanity or their allies, then humanity would do more than destroy fleets. They would come to the Velkron worlds and end the Empire permanently. Morrison's expression softened slightly as he said that humanity didn't want that outcome. Earth would rather have peace between their species. The choice was entirely up to the Velkrons. They could rebuild and learn from their mistakes and join the galactic community as peaceful neighbors. Or they could continue down the path of conquest and face complete annihilation. He told them to choose wisely, and then the transmission ended. On the Velkron homeworld, the remaining leaders of the Empire gathered in emergency session to discuss what had just happened. They had lost 3 fleets and millions of warriors. The military that had conquered 47 star systems over 3 centuries was gone. Every ship and every weapon and every soldier had been erased in a series of battles that lasted less than an hour combined. The human admirals' words echoed in their minds as they debated what to do next. Some wanted to continue fighting and find new ways to attack Earth, but most recognized the truth that they were facing something far beyond their ability to defeat. Humanity was not prey but a predator that had been hiding its true nature. 2 weeks after Morrison's transmission, the Velkron Empire formally requested peace negotiations through diplomatic channels. They acknowledged defeat and asked for terms that would prevent further conflict. President Bennett accepted their request, and negotiations began that would shape the relationship between the two species for generations to come. But the effects of what humanity had done rippled far beyond just the Velcron Empire. News of the battles spread throughout the galaxy at the speed of light and faster, through the network of species that had faster-than-light communication. Every civilization that heard the story reacted in different ways. Some species that had been considering hostile action against Earth quietly abandoned their plans and sent peaceful greetings instead. Trade agreements were suddenly offered by species that had previously ignored humanity. Diplomatic channels opened from dozens of worlds that wanted to establish friendly relationships. The Xipheron Collective formally welcomed humanity as full members of the Galactic Assembly with all the rights and responsibilities that came with that status. Earth had gone from an isolated world that most of the galaxy didn't know existed to a major power that everyone was talking about. The transition happened in less than 3 months, and it changed everything. Morrison stood in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains one last time before his scheduled retirement. President Bennett had awarded him and his entire team the highest honors that Earth could give. There were parades in major cities and monuments being built to commemorate what they had accomplished. But Morrison felt uncomfortable with all the attention, because he knew that what they had done came with a terrible cost. 12.6 million Velcrons plus 1.8 million from the Second Fleet, plus 900,000 from the First Fleet. Nearly 15 million lives ended, because humanity had the weapons and the will to use them. Amy stood beside Morrison as they looked at the star charts showing the expanding sphere of human influence in the galaxy. She had been promoted to commander, and would be taking over Morrison's position when he left. Morrison told her quietly that they had shown the galaxy humanity could defend itself. Now they had to prove they were worthy of the power they had claimed. Amy thought the hard part was over, but Morrison shook his head with a slight smile. He told her the hard part was just beginning because anyone could destroy things. Building something better and creating lasting peace and earning the trust of species that feared humanity would be the real challenge. But if humans could go from primitive satellites to quantum weapons in just 100 years, then he believed they were up to the task. Morrison looked around the command center one last time at the screens, showing a peaceful Earth protected by the most advanced defense network in known space. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through conquest, but through the determination to protect what was theirs. The Empire had sent 3 fleets to invade Earth, and humanity had erased them from the stars in seconds. But more importantly, humanity had chosen not to become the monsters they had defeated. That choice would define Earth's future in the galaxy more than any weapon ever could. Morrison left the command center and walked out into the sunlight, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. His part in this story was over, and now it was time for others to write the next chapters. The peace negotiations with the Velcron Empire took 6 months and resulted in a treaty that surprised many observers. Earth did not demand reparations or territory or any kind of punishment for the attacks. Instead, humanity asked for 3 things. First was a formal recognition that Earth's solar system was sovereign territory that would never be violated again. Second was the establishment of diplomatic relations and cultural exchange programs. Third was cooperation in scientific research that would benefit both species. The Velcrons agreed to all 3 terms and signed the treaty with a mixture of relief and bewilderment. They had expected harsh terms and cruel punishment, but instead received mercy and an offer of friendship. The treaty became a model for how Earth would interact with other species in the galaxy. Humanity made it clear they had no interest in building an empire or conquering other worlds. Earth would defend itself and its allies with overwhelming force if necessary, but would always prefer peace and cooperation. This approach earned humanity respect from many species who had grown tired of the old ways, where might made right, and the strong dominated the weak. Within a year of the battles, Earth had established formal diplomatic relations with 43 different species. Trade flourished and human ships began traveling to distant worlds carrying goods and ideas. The Xipheron Collective became Earth's closest allies, and the friendship between the two species deepened over time. The Xipherons taught humanity many things about galactic politics and history and technology. In return, humans shared their own discoveries and innovations. The quantum weapons technology that had saved Earth was carefully controlled and never shared with other species. Humanity recognized that such power needed to be kept in responsible hands. Several species requested access to the technology, but Earth politely declined every time. Some understood and respected the decision, while others resented it and saw humanity as selfishly hoarding their advantages. 5 years after the battles, Morrison came out of retirement to attend a ceremony at the newly constructed Galactic Assembly Hall on a neutral world called Haven. The hall was a massive structure built by dozens of species working together, and it served as the meeting place for representatives from across the galaxy. Earth's delegation was led by Ambassador Kyle Peterson, who had worked tirelessly to build bridges between humanity and other species. The ceremony was to mark Earth's official acceptance as a founding member of the new Galactic Council, which would work to prevent wars and promote cooperation. Morrison was there as an honored guest, and he sat in the audience, watching as Peterson gave a speech about humanity's vision for the future. Peterson spoke about how Earth had learned hard lessons about the cost of violence and the value of peace. Humanity had the power to destroy, but chose instead to build. Earth would work with all species who wanted peace and would defend any who were threatened by aggressors. The speech received mixed reactions from the assembled representatives. Some applauded enthusiastically, while others remained silent. Morrison understood that humanity's rapid rise to power had made many species uncomfortable. They wondered if Earth's peaceful intentions would last, or if humans would eventually follow the same path as the Velcron Empire and so many others before them. Only time would tell. Back on Earth, life had changed in countless ways since the battles. The revelation that humanity was not alone in the universe had transformed society completely. Schools taught alien languages and galactic history. Human scientists worked alongside researchers from other species on projects that pushed the boundaries of knowledge. Artists and musicians incorporated alien influences into their work, creating new forms of expression. Young people dreamed of traveling to distant worlds and exploring the galaxy. Earth's population grew more diverse as some aliens came to live among humans and learn about their culture. Most adapted well, but there were occasional tensions and misunderstandings that required patience and goodwill to resolve. The Terra Defense Force continued to grow and improve under Amy's leadership. New ships were built, incorporating lessons learned from the battles. Training programs were established to prepare crews for any possible threat. But Amy made sure that every member of the Defense Force understood they were protectors, not conquerors. The weapons they controlled were to be used only in defense of Earth and its allies. She often repeated Morrison's words that the real challenge was building peace, not winning wars. The Defense Force became more than just a military organization. They also provided humanitarian aid to species in need and helped with disaster relief on alien worlds and served as ambassadors for humanity's values. 10 years after the battles, Morrison sat on his porch watching the sunset and reflecting on everything that had happened. He was an old man now, and the years had taken their toll, but his mind was still sharp. A ship appeared in the sky above his house and landed gently in his yard. Amy stepped out along with several other officers from the Defense Force. They had come to visit their old commander and share stories about the current state of the galaxy. Morrison welcomed them with a smile, and they sat together as the stars came out. Amy told him about a recent mission where they had helped a small species called the Bentari defend against pirates. The mission had been successful, and the grateful Bentari had asked to establish formal relations with Earth. Morrison listened to the stories and felt proud of what Amy and her team had accomplished. They were living up to the values he had tried to instill in them years ago. The conversation turned to the Velcron Empire, and Morrison asked how they were doing. Amy told him that the Velcrons had rebuilt their society along peaceful lines and were now active members of the Galactic Council. They had even sent a delegation to Earth to establish cultural exchange programs. Former enemies had become friends through years of patient diplomacy and mutual respect. Morrison found that deeply satisfying because it proved that the deaths of 15 million Velcrons had not been in vain. Their sacrifice had led to something better for everyone. As the night grew late, the officers said their goodbyes and returned to their ship. Morrison watched them lift off and disappear into the stars. He thought about the long journey humanity had taken from that first moment when the Velcron fleet appeared in Earth's sky. The choice to develop quantum weapons could have led down a dark path. Earth could have used its power to build an empire and dominate other species. But humanity had chosen differently. They had proven that having the power to destroy did not mean you had to use it. That strength could be tempered with wisdom and mercy. The galaxy was better for that choice, and Earth had earned its place among the stars not through fear, but through respect. Morrison went inside feeling content that he had played his part in creating that future. The age of humanity among the stars had truly begun, and it was a bright age full of hope and possibility.